Most hunters assume the newest Magnum cartridge on the shelf is automatically the best choice for taking down big game. Wildlife agencies across multiple states disagree, and documented ballistics data backs them up completely. One cartridge from 1906 still tops recommendation, lists nearly a century after cartridges twice its size hit the market. The engineering reason why gets overlooked constantly. Let's get into it. This cartridge exists to solve a problem that neither of its rivals could fix on their own, delivering more downrange energy than a .270 Winchester while producing less punishment than a .300 Winchester Magnum. Remington engineers introduced this round in 1962, building it around a belted Magnum case that was already popular among wildcat shooters. The goal was straightforward. Hunters wanted a cartridge that could reach farther than standard rounds without forcing them into the recoil and rifle weight that full Magnum cartridges demanded. Here is what most people miss about this cartridge. Its 7mm bullet diameter was chosen specifically because it offered a higher ballistic coefficient than the .30 caliber bullets used in most American rounds at the time. A higher ballistic coefficient means the bullet sheds velocity more slowly through the air. This design decision lets shooters hold a flatter trajectory at extended range without stepping up to a larger, heavier bullet. A typical loading uses a 160-grain bullet, leaving the barrel at roughly 2,900 feet per second, generating close to 3,000 foot-pounds of energy. Compare that to a .270 Winchester firing a 150-grain bullet, which produces meaningfully less energy at the same distance. Rifles chambered for this cartridge typically run a 24-inch barrel and weigh around 8 pounds unloaded, feeding from a standard-length Magnum action. The trade-off here is availability. Ammunition and rifle options remain far more limited than for .308 Winchester or .30-06 Springfield, and cost reflects that scarcity. That gap matters less for a dedicated hunter who reloads their own ammunition, and matters more for someone walking into a random sporting goods store expecting a full shelf. This cartridge earned its reputation by prioritizing trajectory over raw stopping power, and that single design choice shaped 6 decades of hunting rifle development. Winchester introduced this cartridge in 1925, building it on a necked-down .30-06 Springfield case. Rifle makers wanted a smaller diameter bullet that could travel faster than the standard .30 caliber rounds of the era. Outdoor writer Jack O'Connor became closely associated with this cartridge through decades of hunting articles, and that association helped cement its reputation among American riflemen. Here is the engineering decision that changed everything, necking the .30-06 case down to accept a smaller 277-inch bullet let manufacturers push velocity dramatically higher without changing case capacity. Higher velocity flattens a bullet's trajectory, which reduces the guesswork involved in judging distance before taking a shot. That single modification turned a proven military-derived case into a dedicated long-range hunting round. A typical 130-grain load leaves the barrel around 3,000 feet per second, generating close to 3,000 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle. That energy output rivals the 7mm Remington Magnum, despite firing a noticeably lighter bullet. Rifles chambered for this cartridge commonly run a 22-inch barrel, weigh around 7.5 pounds, and cycle through a standard-length bolt action. The trade-off shows up against larger game. This cartridge carries less bullet mass than .30 caliber options, which limits its effectiveness on animals like elk or bear, where deeper penetration through heavy bone matters more than flat trajectory. That limitation rarely matters for deer-sized game at open country distances, which is exactly the role this cartridge was built for. This cartridge exists for one purpose: generating enough downrange energy to ethically take the largest game animals hunted legally in North America, from elk to brown bear. Winchester released this cartridge in 1963, the same year as the 7mm Remington Magnum, entering a market already competing for hunters who wanted more power than standard cartridges could deliver. Engineers built it around a belted Magnum case, capable of holding significantly more powder than a standard .30-06 case. Here is the engineering decision that changed everything. Winchester designed this cartridge to fit within a standard-length rifle action instead of the longer Magnum actions that earlier belted cartridges required. Fitting Magnum-level powder capacity into a standard action meant hunters could get Magnum performance without buying a specialized, heavier rifle platform. That single decision made Magnum power accessible to hunters who already owned standard-length bolt guns. A typical 180-grain load leaves the barrel around 2,960 feet per second, generating roughly 3,500 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle. Compare that to .30-06 Springfield, firing the same bullet weight, which produces close to 600 foot-pounds less energy at the muzzle. Rifles chambered for this cartridge typically run a 24-inch barrel, weigh around 8.5 pounds, and cycle through that standard-length Magnum action. The trade-off is recoil. This cartridge generates close to 15 foot-pounds of felt recoil in an 8-pound rifle, noticeably sharper than .30-06 or .308 Winchester. That recoil matters little to a hunter, taking one deliberate shot at an elk across a mountain basin, but it matters considerably to a new shooter sighting in an afternoon. This cartridge was built to do almost everything .30-06 Springfield could do, out of a shorter, lighter rifle action. And that compromise made it the foundation for dozens of modern firearms platforms. The United States military developed this cartridge in the early 1950s as part of an effort to shorten rifle actions without sacrificing battlefield performance. Standardized in 1952, it became the parent case for the military's 7.62 by 51 NATO round, before hunters and rifle makers adopted the civilian version. Its short action length let engineers design lighter, more compact bolt guns and semi-automatic platforms around it. Here is what most people miss about this cartridge. Military engineers achieved nearly the same ballistic performance as .30-06 Springfield, using a case roughly half an inch shorter, by improving powder efficiency rather than simply increasing case capacity. Shortening the case meant rifle actions could shrink too, cutting both weight and overall rifle length. That single change is why this cartridge became the basis for platforms ranging from bolt-action hunting rifles to the AR-10. A typical 150-grain load leaves the barrel around 2,820 feet per second, generating close to 2,600 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle. Compare that to .30-06 Springfield, firing the same bullet weight, which generates roughly 300 more foot-pounds at the muzzle. Rifles chambered for this cartridge commonly run a 20-inch barrel, weigh around 7 pounds, and cycle through a short action platform. The trade-off is a modest reduction in energy and effective range compared to its parent cartridge. That gap matters little inside 300 yards on deer-sized game, which covers the overwhelming majority of hunting shots taken in North America. You have waited long enough. Here it is, .30-06 Springfield. Introduced in 1906, this cartridge has outlasted every rival on this list by decades, and documented ballistics data explains exactly why it refuses to become obsolete. The United States military adopted this cartridge in 1906 to fix accuracy problems with an earlier round, and it went on to serve through 2 world wars, Korea and Vietnam, before the military transitioned to shorter cartridges. Outside military service, rifle manufacturers embraced it immediately because of one trait no other cartridge on this list can match. Its case can accept bullets ranging from 100 to 220 grains, a spread wider than .308 Winchester, .270 Winchester, or either Magnum cartridge covered so far. Here is the engineering decision that changed everything. Rather than optimizing this cartridge for one specific game animal, its designers built a case with enough internal capacity to push both light, fast bullets and heavy, deep, penetrating bullets effectively. That flexibility means a single rifle chambered for this cartridge can be loaded for pronghorn one season and switched to loads suited for elk or black bear the next, without buying a second rifle. A typical 180-grain load leaves the barrel around 2,700 feet per second, generating close to 2,900 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle. Compare that to .308 Winchester, which trails by roughly 300 foot-pounds using the same bullet weight, and to .300 Winchester Magnum, which exceeds it by only around 600 foot-pounds despite far sharper recoil and a specialized Magnum case. Rifles chambered for this cartridge commonly run a 22-inch barrel, weigh around 7.5 pounds, and cycle through a standard length action found in nearly every major rifle lineup produced in America. The trade-off is recoil that runs higher than .308 Winchester or .270 Winchester, though noticeably lighter than either Magnum cartridge covered on this list. Caliber choice comes down to matching bullet performance and legal minimums to the game being hunted, not chasing the largest number on a box of ammunition. A cartridge developed in 1906 still outperforms newer Magnums in one category that matters most to most hunters: versatility. Which caliber on this list would you trust for an all-around hunting rifle, and why? Drop your answer in the comments. This video covers cartridge history and ballistics for educational purposes only. Always confirm current state hunting regulations and minimum caliber requirements before selecting ammunition for any hunt. Subscribe for more documentary-style breakdowns built on verified historical records, engineering research, and ballistics data most hunting channels never dig into.